So I will call this meeting of the August 24th Plan Commission to order. We do have some information to hear from our technical facilitator, Jesse.
All right, welcome to our virtual meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. If you remain muted, or you will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email list in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is agenda item 1, public comment, and I am not showing any public comment. Ms. Stouter, can you confirm that? Yes. Okay, no general public comment. Next on our agenda is communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? I see no raised hands, so no disclosures or recusals. I will note one communication. We will be updating the Plan Commission Policy and Procedures Manual and expect to have that to Plan Commission members for approval at one of our September meetings. And this is based primarily upon input that we got at our meeting to discuss how we might be able to make our meetings a little bit more efficient and correcting a few errors in that document. Next item on the agenda, we have minutes for the July 30th special meeting. And then also minutes of the August 10th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to either of those? Mr. Hagenow, Commissioner Hagenow.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of this when we were asking for recusals, but I wasn't here for the August 10th meeting, so I won't be voting on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. Same for me. I was not at the August 10th meeting, so I'm going to abstain from that vote.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else? Do we have a motion for approval? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Do we have a second? We need a second. Seconded by Alder Heck. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the minutes pass unanimously. Next on the agenda is the schedule of upcoming meetings. We have a regular meeting September 14th and then also October 5th and October 19th. Next on our agenda is public hearing, and since it's not 5:45, I will turn to our secretary for the secretary's report. Ms. Stouter.
Thank you very much. Looking at the September 14th meeting, the items that I'll mention, we'll have 2 plan amendments before you on the southeast side of town, the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan and the Marsh Road Neighborhood Development Plan, both changes to the street network in those plan areas. And then the next item on the list, 4,000 to 4150 Packers Avenue. This is the return of the Ramish Farm development, a plat and rezoning to create 124 single-family lots and 7 lots for future multifamily and mixed-use development on the north side. And then next, the 109 to 209 Cottage Grove Road, demolition and conditional use to demolish 3 commercial buildings and construct 2 new buildings, both a 4-story mixed-use building with 78 apartments and a 4-story residential building with 110 units. And then finally, the other item of note, 1313 Regent Street, a significant 3-story addition to a building that contains 63 apartment units above and behind an existing commercial space along Regent Street. And then looking at the October 5th agenda, I think I'll mention 2 main items, both, let's see, on 754 to 904 Felland Road. This is the return of the Jana Village plat, which includes both single family and some multifamily lots. And then 10009 Sweet Willow Pass, just a conditional use to construct a residential building complex with 110 new residential units. Those, I think, are the main items of note. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stouter. Since it is not yet 5:45, we will stand informal until that time. And this is one of the things that we will be adjusting in our policies and procedures so that we can begin a little bit sooner. So I will see you at 5:45. Thank you. It being 5:45, we can now commence the public hearings. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item tonight. These items are placed onto the consent agenda and they are addressed at the beginning of the public hearing section of our meeting. People here on those items can then leave the meeting early unless a member of the commission requests separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. Of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda items 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Are there any requests for separation? I'm looking for raised hands. Are there any requests for separation? Seeing none, we will proceed to then the consent agenda. The first item on the consent agenda is agenda item 2, Legistar 61539, amending the dimensional requirements of permitted and conditional uses and adding farmers market as a permitted use in the suburban employment district. Then zoning map amendments, items 3 and 4 are related and considered together. The item 3, Legistar 60903, creating Madison general ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 909 Jennifer Street, 6th Alder District, from traditional residential varied 1 to traditional residential varied 2. Agenda item 4, Legistar 60682, also located at 909 Jennifer Street, 3rd Lake Ridge Historic District, 6th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the proposed traditional residential varied 2 district for a housing cooperative to convert 2 apartment buildings into a 25-bed cooperative. Agenda item 6 and 7 are considered together. Agenda item 6, Legistar 61592, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 5622 East Park Boulevard, 17th Alder District, from Commercial Center District to Commercial Corridor Transitional District. Agenda item 7, Legistar 60347, also located at 5622 East Park Boulevard, consideration of a conditional use in the proposed Commercial Corridor Transitional Zoning District for more than 24 dwelling units, consideration of a conditional use in CCT District for a mixed-use building with a street facing width greater than 40 feet, with less than 75% of the ground floor frontage facing the primary street, as including all frontage at a street corner as non-residential uses, consideration of a conditional use in the CCT District for a mixed-use building with less than 75% of the ground floor area as non-residential, consideration of a conditional use in the CCT District for multifamily dwellings with more than 8 dwelling units, and consideration of a conditional use in the CCT District for accessory outdoor recreation to allow construction of a complex with 2 4-story mixed-use buildings and 3 3-story multifamily buildings containing 4,300 square feet of overall commercial space and 306 apartments with an accessory pool and clubhouse. Agenda item 9, Legistar 61381, located at 1851 Monroe Street in the 13th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district for a walk-up service window within 10 feet of the public right-of-way. Agenda item 10, Legistar 61382, located at 6119 Odana Road, 19th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the commercial corridor district to convert a restaurant tavern into a restaurant nightclub. Agenda item 11, Legistar 61383, located at 414 Grand Canyon Drive, 19th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the commercial corridor district for a car wash. Agenda item 12, Legistar 61474, located at 849 East Washington Avenue, 6th Alder District. Consideration of a conditional use in the traditional employment district to convert a tavern into a nightclub, and consideration of a conditional use in the TE district to construct an outdoor eating area for a nightclub. Agenda item 13, Legistar 61660, reapproving the final plat of Western Addition to 1000 Oaks subdivision on land generally addressed as 10024 Valley View Road, 9th Alder District. I will open the public hearing on these. Do we have a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hagenow. I will assume unanimous consent of the consent agenda unless I see raised hands to object. Looking for raised hands. Seeing none, the consent agenda passes unanimously. And now on to the full public hearing portion of our agenda. The first item to be heard is agenda item 5, Legistar 61389, creating section 28.022 through 00459 of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district at properties located at 6003 through 6067 Gemini Drive, 3rd Alder District, to approve an amended general development plan and creating section 28.022 through 00460 to amend a planned development district to approve a specific implementation plan. And we do have a presentation by Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Plan Commission. Item number 5 regards the B block at Grandview Commons Town Center, addressed as 6003 through 6067 Gemini Drive. The applicant is requesting approval of an amended general development plan and a specific implementation plan to construct an L-shaped 6-story mixed-use building with approximately 5,800 square feet of ground floor commercial space along North Star Drive and 147 apartment units on the undeveloped portion of the block, which also contains an existing 9,650 square foot 1-story commercial building located in the southeastern corner of the block adjacent to the intersection of Gemini Drive and Cottage Grove Road. For reference, the B block is located alphabetically between the A block to the west and the C block to the east. The A block notably developed with the 2-story building containing the Great Dane Brew Pub, and the C block developed with the 58,000 square foot Metro Market. There's also 2 1-story commercial buildings along the Gemini Drive frontage. The applicant is requesting approval to build an L-shaped building that will parallel both the North Star Drive and Sharpsburg frontages. Staff has reviewed the project and it believes that the Plan Commission may be able to recommend approval of the project to the Common Council. A couple of things of note, however. The building is 2 stories taller than what is generally recommended for the subject site by the comprehensive plan. The subject site recommends the B block for neighborhood mixed use development. That's consistent with the recommendation for the A block to the west. However, the C block to the east was changed to the community mixed use district with the 2012 amendment, with the 2012 approval of the grocery store because under the 2006 comprehensive plan, buildings larger than 25,000 square feet, including grocery stores, were only recommended in the community mixed use district. So the density that is proposed is consistent with the density of residential anticipated in the in the neighborhood mixed use district of 70 units an acre. However, development in neighborhood mixed use is generally recommended for 2 to 4 story tall buildings. And again, the proposed building is 6, and actually at some locations on the site, it will appear taller because of the grades that are present. A 6-story building would be more consistent with what you would expect to see in a community mixed use district in the comp plan, as 2 to 6-story buildings are allowed in the community mixed use district. So in this case, the project is in the NMU district in the comp plan, but it is a bigger building than we would ordinarily see in the NMU district. The comprehensive plan gives considerable deference to the recommendations in sub-area plans, which tend to be more specific and detailed than the broad land use categories that you see in the comprehensive plan. In this case, the site is subject to the 1998 Sprecher Neighborhood Development Plan, which recommends that the subject site be developed as a village-like town center with multi-story mixed-use buildings placed close to the sidewalk, parking in the rear or center of the block in the case of the proposal that's before you tonight, and the creation of a high degree of pedestrian amenity. The neighborhood development plan, however, does not specify how tall or how dense new development in the town center should be. In general, the proposed building is consistent with the recommended characteristics for the town center that were recommended in the Sprecher neighborhood plan. And staff feels that there is adequate precedent given that the proposed 6-story building is kitty corner from a 5-story building located just to the northwest. It's actually the View Apartments, which is the building to the northwest of the subject site, is technically a 6-story building, accounting for a rooftop amenity that's recessed from view, but the majority of the building is a full 5-story building. So we believe that the Plan Commission may take that into consideration. And we do feel that the intensity of development that's proposed in the form of the 6-story building is consistent with the intensity that was envisioned for Cottage Grove Road, which is identified as a community growth corridor, and also as part of a peripheral growth area per the 2018 comprehensive plan. So we feel that there is policy allowance for a taller building than what you would ordinarily see in the neighborhood mixed use district. While the Plan Commission is considering the building, while we are generally supportive of it at the staff level, we would ask the Plan Commission to weigh in on the massing of the proposed 6-story building. We feel that there should be more done to modulate the mass of the building, particularly along Sharpsburg Drive facing to the north, to create more visual interest along that facade and to make the proposed building less monolithic. We have identified in the staff report where we feel that there's an opportunity for that to be done, and that would be the bend in the building as it extends east to west along Sharpsburg Drive. I would point out that the Plan Commission's recommendation on the design is pertinent both because the Plan Commission has to find that the plan development standards are met in recommending the project to the Common Council. Also, the applicant has proactively submitted an application for final approval to the Urban Design Commission. That's scheduled for September 2nd. So any feedback that the Plan Commission would have about the design of the building would be communicated to the Urban Design Commission in anticipation of their review of final approval next Wednesday. So with that, I'll close it there and be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Brian Munson, 120 East Lakeside Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing Gray Rock at Grandview, LLC, 100 River Place, Madison, to be followed by Marc Ott. Mr. Munson.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on tonight. Glad to be back to talk about a project that has really been long in the making. So Grandview Commons, we began work on in 1998 and have continued to focus in on the town center, trying to find ways through various different iterations to create the setting that I think everybody has been striving for. And so we're very excited tonight to be here to talk about the final addition to the town center. And it's funny a little bit about how it all comes full circle. This area was originally, in the very first approval back in the late 90s, early 2000s, envisioned for approximately 200 units of residential with commercial. And so we're glad to be back here to really deliver on that premise. If you could go to the next slide. As Tim mentioned, this is set along the north side of Cottage Grove Road at North Star Drive, really the commercial, one of the commercial entrances into the town center. It's adjacent to the Great Dane and the Metro Market commercial area, as well as the View, a 5-story building that's just northwest. It also fronts along the Village Green, something that we worked very hard to preserve in the early days to create and preserve that view to the west back to the Capitol. And we're excited how this project really fits into the context of what we've been working on. Since the 2012 approval, we have continued to try to find ways to answer the call to bring some additional opportunities for housing and mixed use into this project. We have worked very closely with the neighborhood association and the city staff, Alder Lemmer, and many other people in getting to the approval here tonight. And we're excited to present the changes that we've made in response to UDC's comments as we begin to move through the final review of the architecture. As Tim mentioned, this is an L-shaped building that really fronts out to North Star with their commercial tenant space. And then we've worked very hard to create a walking environment along Sharpsburg and are excited about how that will complete out that walking district along the way. We are very cognizant of the challenges of this site. If we went back to 2012, one of the reasons we had 1- and 2-story buildings was the presence of bedrock underneath this site really drove the economics to either be 1 or 2 stories or up at 6, so that we could afford to excavate that bedrock to create the parking. And in between, the economics become very difficult to support the excavation. So that's really what drove us in the direction of this, in concert with wanting to really bring additional residential uses up into the town center and support the commercial and supportive activity along the Village Green. So we're very excited. We have Marc Ott with JLA Architecture here. We have Dan Brinkman on behalf of the development team, as well as Dan Day available to answer questions that you might have on the engineering side of things. So as I said, it's been a long project in incubation, but we're excited to bring this forward tonight and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Munson. The next registrant is Marc Ott, 800 West Broadway, Monroe, Wisconsin, in support, representing DSI Real Estate, 100 River Place, Madison, Wisconsin. And just a reminder, 3 minutes, and to be followed by Dan Brinkman, who does not wish to speak. So, okay. Mr. Ott.
Hey, good evening. Want to make sure everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If you could go to the next slide, please. So Marc Ott with JLA Architects here to go through some of the architectural designs of the plan. So what you're looking at on screen right now, which should be in your packet, is our architectural site plan. So this shows the building hugging the street faces of North Star and Sharpsburg. So as Brian mentioned, it's an L-shaped building, a little kink in it up on the Sharpsburg to follow the street. What you see in the center there to the lower corner of Cottage Grove Road and Gemini Drive is the existing single-story commercial building, which is, as I just mentioned, already built out there. And what you see then in the center is what Brian alluded to, which is the walking path, the pedestrian walkway and spline that connects from what you can't see on this slide here is the block next to this on Gemini to the east is the Metro Market grocery store. So there's a spline that connects and runs through their parking lot to their building, comes across and then connects to ours through our site, across through where it says Plaza. And you can see zoomed in there, it says water feature, and then back out to North Star and out to what is the Great Dane on the other side. So really focused on this great continuity between sites and between lots to keep that pedestrian friendly atmosphere. And we'll get into some images as we go through the packet. But one thing I wanted to point out here is the building is an L shape, but on the ground, you'll see that it's broken up with that plaza. And we have some commercial space to the south and some commercial space to the north on North Star with that plaza in the middle, which again is a community feature. We're proposing to have a water feature in there. We're working with an aquatic designer right now on what that will be. And again, we'll show some images in the next couple slides. Up along Sharpsburg, again, some of the things that we've taken into account, we have been in front of UDC, as it was mentioned a couple times, for initial and informational, and we've submitted a package back that will be in front of them, as was mentioned, and anticipate getting approval. We have added some walk-up entries off of Sharpsburg that came out of those meetings as suggestions of more better, design elements that we could add to better help out with the pedestrian feel of the building. You can go to the next slide. So this is a view of the corner of Sharpsburg and North Star. Here you see on the ground floor there, you'll see where we've got our commercial space, and then up above is our one of our residential amenities, which is a second floor club room. Again, you see the architecture here, very high quality materials. We have gone back, like I said, with UDC, and their comments have been to simplify kind of the material palette and make the building more cohesive, which is what we've done here. What you're seeing is the newest presentation that they're going to be reviewing. We're using high quality stone and fiber cement and composite materials, as well as wood grain fiber cement on that. We'll go to the next slide. Here you see basically from the corner of Cottage Grove Road and North Star, here's our other commercial space that you can see there, the stone one-story amenity. So again, bookending the North Star Drive there. Go to the next slide. Here you can see the parking lot area of the building, and this is where it's a little hard to see, but with all the trees, that is the spline of the pedestrian walkway through the site. So it's not...
Thank you, Mr. Ott. That concludes your 3 minutes. The next registrant is Dan Brinkman, 100 River Place, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions, representing DSI Real Estate Group, River Place, Madison, Wisconsin. The next registrant is Dan Day of Westward Way in Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions, representing Viridian Homes. Are there questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, 1 second. This, I guess, for anybody on the development team, could somebody speak to how the project responds to standard D and the PD standards of approval, which is the plan shall include measurable goals, strategies, and actions to encourage travelers to use alternatives to driving alone, etc.
And let's unmute Mr. Munson, and you can indicate if you're the right person or if someone else should speak. Mr.
Sure.
Munson.
So a couple things. One is something we've been working very hard to achieve for many years. We have limited bus service that comes up North Star, and we are anticipating that by creating additional nodes of residential at higher densities, that this project will help drive a demand for an enhanced bus service out into the Sprecher neighborhood by creating clear destinations of both commercial and residential density. We have encouraged and will be working refining the bike parking components throughout. One of the things this town center was designed with was cycle tracks and bike routing in and out of the site so that you have good access along Cottage Grove Road. There are on-street lanes as well as throughout the neighborhood. There are a variety of on-street facilities to encourage biking throughout. But probably the largest way that this really does is, as I said, by creating that node and really delivering the neighborhood focused destination in concert with the surrounding commercial uses, completing that out as a destination to support transit use in support of the entire neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any further questions, Commissioner Sundquist?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, staff raised the monolithic north side of the building. How do you plan to address that? I guess that's a concern I have too, that I'm not real thrilled about the architecture. I think it's kind of looks like an old, large condo project in Florida. So, you know, I would, but anyway, I guess the question that I have is how are you addressing that? And I know that those questions are probably more appropriate at the urban design, but I guess I want to make sure that the urban design addresses some of those concerns.
Well, I'll start off and then I'll let Mark jump in. A couple of techniques that we've done. Obviously, when we talked to urban design and got initial approval on the mass and the architecture, one of the comments they made was simplifying materials and the expressions of the architecture. And so what this submittal does that you see, actually, if you could, Tim, would it be possible to pull up the presentation and jump to page 2 pages before that so you can see the Sharpsburg corner. There you go. So what we've done in this elevation, a couple of things. One was eroding the corner was something we wanted to do early on. So that's actually an upper patio outside there on the second floor. So that creates a lot of interesting relief and view corridor up into the park, as well as eroding the corner. Along Sharpsburg Drive, we've incorporated first floor entrances so that those units have individual walkways to their entrances. And then really work to change the expression of the architecture as you go vertically within the project, and looking at the materials and then just how that is all pulled together. So what you see here on the screen is different than what was in the packet. This is what's been submitted back to UDC in response to their requests for additional changes on the architecture. But we felt that overall that the massing really responds with the curvature of this, the corner there on Sharpsburg, and the design of the landscape in concert with the building really did help break that down and create an interesting corner there along Sharpsburg. I'd defer to Mark. I don't know if you have anything else that you'd want to add in there, but hopefully that addresses your question.
Does that address your question, Commissioner Cantrell?
Well, I like that corner of the building. The ends of the building, I guess, I are kind of troubling me at least. Okay. And the lid on the building, I guess the building across the street, I think it's called the View Apartments. That's a very attractive building as I view it. And it doesn't have kind of a lid like this one has. And I guess I would hope that you would look at that with the Urban Design Committee, because I think that part of at least the architecture for me looks old. But anyway, that's the concern I have, and I just wanted to raise it with you and Mr. Munson and the architect.
Okay. Mark, I don't know if you would want to add anything to what I said, but I appreciate the comments. One of the things we did do Commissioner Cantrell was we did change the end expressions with the way that the vertical elements of those kind of anchor and flank the corners. So Mark, if you want to give just a few seconds and just comment on that, what we've done on this facade.
Sure. Am I unmuted? All right.
Yes, you are.
All right, great. So again, not being an architect, Brian said everything perfect. he used lots of great language. So yes, Brian's exactly right. Again, what we've done, I mean, we did try a number of other architectural design techniques on the building that Brian kind of alluded to. And in our different iterations, went through a couple of different meetings with the Urban Design Commission, and to try to address some of those things that were brought up and that you're bringing up, Alder. And actually what Urban Design Commission gave us for feedback was to actually to actually simplify the design. So we had been trying more architectural expressions, like I mentioned, and they just actually weren't jiving on it. So they actually said, kind of simplify your design, make it a little more cohesive. And so this new iteration is actually our response to that, and adding some more stone on the corners, as you can kind of see. And actually, I'm looking at my position. I don't have it on screen, but the screenshot of Sharpsburg that was on kind of shows that. And again, yes, pulling that corner back. So we hear you as far as the lid and the different architecture. Totally agree. That's a great looking building across the street. And of course, the one thing I think is very unique about Grandview Commons out there is if you go and look at it, there are a number of multifamily buildings. And the very interesting part that urban design has done great with out there is that it's a very varied palette of architectural styles. You can see just about everything out there. So with this one, it's again, a different style that's not out there that we feel is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Ott. Let's check back with Commissioner Cantrell and see if that has covered it for him.
Yeah, I think it covers it. The lid on the project is, I would hope that you would address that with the urban design. And I have a buddy on the urban design committee, and I'll put a plug in his ear too. Okay. Anyway, but thank you. I drive out to Grandview Commons a lot. I go to the Metro Market, so I'm very familiar with that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I think the first one is probably for Mark. It sounded like he was going to describe the plaza a little bit more, and he ran out of time. I would love it if he could share, any information he has on what the plaza is going to look like, what it's going to include, and to just validate that that's going to be a public space. Yeah. And then I've got some other questions too, but I'll start with that.
Great. Am I muted again? If who's controlling the presentation, if they could pull that back
Mr.
up.
Parks, yeah.
Tim, I think it's like the third from the last slide. Yep. All right. So this is, and yep, go back two. These are two, this is the same view. It's just some nighttime view and some a little bit more daytime view. So this is a view of that plaza that we talked about. And so you can see in the center there, and there's kind of a blue globe. So that's an actual proposed water feature. So a fountain of some type. Again, we're working with an aquatic designer on what that center kind of piece is, but we're talking about that being a water feature surrounded by, if you look at all the seating under there. And again, we're really focused as, obviously there's a building over it. We're very conscious of our lighting systems in there and what we can do to make that feel warm and inviting and not a dark cave. And so, that's, again, that flows through. If you were to look at the site plan again, you'd see that it's got the pedestrian walkway that comes over from Metro Market right through this and then down the steps and out to the Great Dane on the other side. So this is our concept currently of that plaza.
Okay.
Did you have additional questions then, Alder Lemmer?
I do have a couple. So with regards to the commercial space, do you have ideas for what kinds of businesses or organizations would go in there?
For that, I would defer to Dan Brinkman, who's on the development team. If he could be unmuted.
Am I there? Hello?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I could talk to that quite a bit. We've been marketing retail out on that site now for decades. We were got the grocery store in and actually got the approval for the 2 first retail buildings and subsequently sold them to another developer. And then we built and filled the latest retail building there, most recently with the long-awaited coffee shop. So we're very familiar with the supply and demand out there for retail. And as we all know, the future of retail is changing rapidly as we begin to Amazon our lives, even more so with COVID and so forth. So we're talking more about service retail and neighborhood retail. One of the uses that for sure is on the plan is another restaurant out there. We still have room for another one. I think the Great Dane is enthused about that as well. So that is a major part of it. And then beyond that, it could be some additional neighborhood retail, service retail, bike shop, that sort of thing. We really want to get actual service retail in there as opposed to filling it with like an office or something like that, because we really want to activate that plaza. That plaza that we just showed has commercial on the north and the south end of that. It's surrounded by it. So we want a use in those commercial spaces that not only would give some good services for the neighborhood, but also activate that space. And so some outdoor seating or other interaction is really what we're after.
Awesome. Thank you. I have one more question. I apologize, it didn't occur to me before, but as you know, this is a very dog-friendly area. Are the apartments planned to be pet-friendly?
I can speak to that. I also run all of our property management. So all of our properties that we run are pet-friendly to one extent or another. We try to be cognizant of the animals' needs. So for instance, in this particular property, I would probably foresee us putting some sort of weight restriction on dogs in that building, just because, up and down the elevators, all that kind of thing, as opposed to like a townhome that you can go up. Although a lot of the ground floor apartments here do have doors to the outside. So the answer is yes, they would definitely be pet friendly. I think especially in Madison, but especially in that neighborhood, a landlord would be nuts not to be pet friendly because there are so many pets out there. And we just welcomed Earthwise Pet Store right next door to the coffee shop. So that's right across the kitty corner on the lot of this property. So it all makes sense.
Okay, great. And would you be open to putting some dog receptacles on the site?
Oh, not only would be open to it, we plan on it for sure.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Just a few questions for the development team then. One thing I look at in a lot of these developments of this size that we don't seem to be requiring, and we probably can't require, but I wondered if you've given any thought to providing any community garden space, particularly these days when people are, not going to grocery stores perhaps as much as they used to. I think those kind of assets would be very valuable. Did you give any consideration to that?
I'll speak to that. We certainly have given consideration to that to some of our other projects, and we're certainly open to it and understand exactly what you're saying. All of us are growing a lot more of our own food than we used to. Unfortunately, we really, in all honesty, didn't give a lot of consideration to it on this site simply because we just don't really have a place to put it. It's a very tight site, and by the time you get the building on there, make sure you have the public connections and the public spaces. There's just wasn't any room to do a garden that would really be meaningful. Because, think about 147 units. So to have a garden that would, facilitate a large number of our residents there would have to be pretty sizable, and we just don't have the space there. So I don't know, Brian, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think, Dan, you hit it on the head. The other aspect of that is we worked very hard many years ago and are glad it's still successful. There's the farmers market that actually occurs right on Sharpsburg, right in front of this site, and we're excited to have that available for our residents. But as Dan mentioned, this is a tight urban site, and so really to get the kind of gardens that would be supportive of the entire building, it would be very difficult to achieve on this site.
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear about the farmers market. In the future, I'd encourage you to think about getting creative with rooftop spaces and all sorts of things, but that's for another time. So thank you for that answer. I'm going to ask if we could look at the slide that had the parking level, the 2 parking levels on consecutive slides. I'm going to channel our old and longtime colleague, Mike Rui, and ask about the bike parking in the garage. It looks like it's quite crammed into the corners that are furthest away from the entrances. So it seems that bikers are going to have to traverse the entire parking levels in order to get out, and if they're in perhaps even 2 floors of parking spaces. So I'm wondering if you considered moving those closer to the entrances and exits.
I could speak to that if you'd like.
There you go, that one.
I think the bike parking on the upper floor of the parking garage, I think, is pretty darn close to the entry there. And I think, point well taken. The lower level one, I never really thought of that before. So the answer to your question is, I think you're right. I think you are setting up a long underground bike ride to get to that second or the lowest level of bike parking. So the answer is yes. I think we'd be more than open to figure out a different way to configure that to make it a little bit more usable for people, for sure.
Okay, great. That would be wonderful. One other bike question. Can you discuss the bike parking for the commercial spaces? Would those primarily be, are there those spaces in the right of way that would service the commercial spaces?
I can speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
They're scattered throughout the site. There are some that are shown on the right-of-way, which we're looking at the feasibility of those. But we also anticipate some happening under the breezeway. So we'd have some covered bike parking and then adjacent to areas of high use. So we're still looking at how best to get those in there. And so we are cognizant of the fact we want to make sure that the bike parking is accessible to people as they approach the site, but also located near their destination. So we anticipate it not just happening in one spot there on the right of way, but also happening within the site itself.
Thank you, Mr. Munson. Does that answer your question about the bike parking?
Yes, that's sufficient. Thanks. One more question now. I'll probably ask Alder Lemmer about this too, but can you just briefly describe your interaction with the neighborhood association? And the reason I'm asking, I may be wrong, but I didn't see a letter from the neighborhood association in our packets, but perhaps I'm mistaken.
And I'll let Dan speak to that, because we've had a very long conversation with the neighborhood association and getting their support. And so, Dan, if you want to speak to the process that we did, because we really made an extra effort to make sure that we had outreach to them. And we've had neighborhood meetings, several, but then Dan, you can kind of allude to the conversations you've had with them.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's important to note that we've been developing in that neighborhood, like Brian said, longer than I care to remember, a couple decades. And so we have a long history of working in that neighborhood and working with that neighborhood association. And we've developed, I think, a really positive relationship with them. I'm a fairly regular contributor at their board meetings. They invite me in to talk about different things in the neighborhood. So it's definitely relationships that we've built over time, and they're very positive. When we first started drawing this concept up and thinking this through a little bit, we went to the neighborhood association first before we even had the plans finalized, and shared with them our thoughts. And as we refine the drawings, I would go back to the board and talk to them some more about it. And they've been very, very supportive about it. In fact, we really weren't willing to submit the plans to the city until we had consensus with the neighborhood association board members to move forward. So we did get that. They emailed me saying that they support, and I've been in contact with them pretty regularly since then. We've also had multiple association board meetings. We had the neighborhood meeting, which went very well. I was well attended. Both, I think, I don't remember. There were a lot of people there. And that went very well too. Alder Lemmer could probably speak to that because she was at a lot of these meetings actually. But it's been very, very positive, and we've been working with them on this project for many months before we even submitted it. And it's been very positive the entire way.
Thanks. And did they submit a letter of support, or am I mistaken that it's not in our packet?
It's not in your packet. It was an oversight on our part, but I did receive email support from them, which I'd be happy to send you if you wanted to see it.
I'm sure Alder Lemmer can corroborate. Not that I don't trust you.
No, I understand.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Alder. I thought Alder Rummel.
I probably been raising my hand and then not raising my hand.
Okay.
So now I'm the last speaker. I'm still a little bit stuck on the 6-story comments from Mr. Parks. And when I look at the staff letter on page 8, it talks about the difference between the northern side of the building and the southern side of the building. And the comments refer to sheet A223 as being something that should be maybe similar on the northern side. Is there a way you could show us the northern side so I understand what the differences are?
Sure. If you could pull up the presentation.
Also, talk again about, I heard you talk about bedrock for why it was 6 stories. So can you delve in a little more about? Happy
to.
Yeah, thanks.
So why don't I start with that one, because that's a little bit easier. The reason the hill is here is because it's got bedrock, solid bedrock, right below the site. And so from an economic standpoint, you're kind of in that catch-22. You either go with a solution that doesn't need any underground parking, a 1 and 2 story solution, which was previously approved, or you have to get the economics, enough density to support excavating down to create the parking. In this case, that's what's driving the 6 stories, because it's the economics of the units that support the excavation to deliver the parking needs for the project. So it's kind of either 1 or 2 stories, or it jumps up to 6 for the numbers to work. And this is bedrock that was present underneath the view, which was a 5-story building, although not as close to the surface, so not as much excavation necessary there. As far as the north side of the building, if you start here with 223, you can kind of see on the right-hand side of this drawing, we have brought the stone components, kind of wrap the corners. That continues all the way around and wraps to the front. So that kind of creates an anchor component on this side. And then as you go around the bend from the south here, you can see how the transition in use in materials continues to lighten the building, and then has the stone component as an echo to the center portion, or the bend in the L. If you could then change to the slide right after this, you can start to see from the other direction how that works, so that you have the stone components forming the ends of the buildings and lightening them, and then the different materials spanning between them to create that architectural expression along the face of Sharpsburg Drive. You can see also there, a little bit hard to see in this view, but the first floor walk-ups. So about 2/3 of the frontage along Sharpsburg will have front doors for the units and sidewalks that connect them. So you kind of have that eyes on the street and visibility in and out there. And then you transition to some of the commercial uses there on the corner, in concert with the lobby space and some gathering spaces and rec room there along Sharpsburg as well. So you generally transition along Sharpsburg as you progress towards North Star from the residential field of the building to a more urban mixed-use corner there at North Star and Sharpsburg.
Okay, so just to sort of follow up, then A224 is what the staff report called the opportunity side. Is that correct?
Yes, and this reflects what you're seeing on the screen is different than what's in the packet, and I think what staff was commenting about as we've continued to address Urban Design Commission's comments about the materials, and again, their call for simplification, I guess was the catchword, so that you have both the stone and then the brown is kind of a wood patterned hardy plank, and then the gray is a siding material. So you have a variety of different materials along here kind of softening that. And then the two bookends with the stone kind of forming the interest on each end, pivoting at the bend in Sharpsburg.
So then just to make sure I'm totally there, the staff report was not talking about what's now in your packet or what you're showing us tonight, which is for UDC.
That is correct. Yeah, what you see here tonight was what we submitted to UDC. Would have been a little bit over a week and a half ago in response to their comments at the initial approval.
So I'll ask Mr. Parks later if that addresses his comments. And then I guess there were no close-ups of the street level of like the facade were there to show those entryways.
Not in this packet. The elevations do show that kind of street level entryway. Unfortunately, no, we don't have a view there along the sidewalk, but we do have room for where we have the residences close up to the sidewalk. We have room for transition landscaping. We pulled the building back a little bit from the sidewalk as it comes around the bend, so that the more urban commercial spaces are tighter to the sidewalk. And then as you come around the bend in Sharpsburg, where you go and switch to residential, it pulls back a little bit. So there's room for landscaping and softening and transition from that public sidewalk to the private entrances to those units.
It's always helpful to see that stuff. So I always say that. Okay. Yeah, because the architectural renderings don't really, my brain doesn't work as well with those, but that's me, I guess. Thank you. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Alder Lemmer, did you wish to speak? She had her hand raised, I guess. Alder Lemmer, did you wish to speak? You're muted.
Oh, thank you. I was getting an error message that I couldn't unmute myself. I was going to speak to Alder Heck's question. I don't know if this is the appropriate time or if that should wait till the discussion portion.
I think it would be fine for you to comment on that. I don't have any other raised hands.
Okay, sounds good. So the engagement with the North Star Neighborhood Association Board has been extensive by DSI. As Dan Brinkman said, he comes to just about all of their monthly board meetings, and there is at least a half dozen meetings where they discussed this project and took into account the Neighborhood Association Board's feedback and comments. So that was absolutely accurate. Concerns that they shared, and they are supportive. They shared, wishing that there was more commercial space, but they understood that the market it doesn't, the market is difficult for that right now. They were concerned about making sure that there is enough parking because this area is already a little bit short on parking. But folks going to the Great Dane often have to drive around to find somewhere to park. So making sure that there is adequate parking was really important to them, and signage. And I believe all of those have been addressed. So they have been supportive. In addition to that, there was, of course, the neighborhood Zoom meeting that we had in May. And there was some technical difficulties with folks who weren't able to sign on. So after that, I recorded a session with Brian Munson where he walked through the project and posted that online. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, thank you, Alder.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, and I don't know that anybody from TE is on, so that we might not get a firm answer on this, but just looking at our agenda today, we had this one, which is a pretty big project, the one in the consent agenda on East Park, which was a conditional use. And both PD and conditional uses standards call out TDM plans, yet neither one of these were required. Staff didn't indicate that there was a discussion about those with these. While by the same token, the one we had last time at Odana and Whitney Way did. So I'm just trying to figure out why would we have the infill ones do it, but not the edge ones do it?
Mr. Parks?
Yeah, I think I can't speak for East Park Boulevard, but I'll say for Grandview Commons, we're pretty well down the road with implementing Grandview Commons over the last 2 decades. And this would be, if not the first, one of the very few projects in Grandview Commons that would be subject to a TDM plan. There's been rather a lot of development in Grandview Commons, including some rather large-scale multifamily buildings, as well as the non-residential components. And to put a TDM condition on this project, while it is an amendment to the GDP and it is a much more intensive use of the site than what was last approved in early 2016, it did not seem to city staff that it would be appropriate to put the condition only on this project versus the Westgate project that was before you last time, which is a large-scale redevelopment of about 60% of Westgate Mall, the introduction of residential, the potential for a large-scale up to 8-story office building, pretty dramatic change to that site being proposed for the first time. And obviously our conversations back in June and July regarding Madison Yards at Hill Farms, again, a redevelopment and the initiation or the beginnings of the implementation of that plan that was approved in 2018. So certainly in both of those cases, in my estimation, a more appropriate time to apply a TDM condition to those projects, whereas here, we're looking at among what could be the last few projects at Grandview Commons, and in my estimation, the horse being a rather fair distance from the barn at this point.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not going to belabor it, and I think I'm going to probably support this project. I would just put a marker on this as more discussions needed on one, because it's not just the 2 that you mentioned. We did 2 on East Wash that had TDM plans. So basically, it looks like we're zeroing in on the infill projects that don't generate that many trips, and then these edge developments are getting by without the same level of scrutiny. I'm not sure I buy this was a pretty big change from what was planned for this part of Grandview Commons before, and certainly could have triggered a discussion on TDM in my mind. But again, I'm not going to argue it. I just think maybe that's a great discussion for our special meeting later in September. Thank you.
And while my mic is still live, I want to point out for the Plan Commission, contrary to Mr. Munson's assertions regarding the plans that are in your packet, that indeed the plans that were presented to the Plan Commission are the plans that have been submitted for the September 2nd Urban Design Commission. They are not an older version of the plans. And the staff report was premised on the plans that are being presented to the Urban Design Commission next week. So I did want to make that clarification while I was still alive, Mike. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Commissioner Sundquist, did you have any other questions? Thank you. Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. This question is related to Commissioner Sundquist's questions. Just questions regarding traffic. So when this is full, will probably be around 196 residents, and hopefully the commercial space gets filled up quickly. It looks like the trips will probably be mainly, coming and going from Gemini Drive to Cottage Grove Road. I'm wondering if there's been a forecasting that you can speak to about whether that's the case, and if there are traffic improvements or changes that would be needed that are being accounted for.
Mr. Parks.
Yes, thank you. I don't have all the answers necessarily to that. I do know that the Traffic Engineering Division did not require a traffic impact analysis for the project. I know that prior to the reconstruction, Gemini Drive was a full access intersection with Cottage Grove Road. And I think the expectation is that most of the trips to and from the site can be handled by that intersection. I think now there's a dedicated, maybe it's a pocketed left turn lane into the site from eastbound Cottage Grove, and then likewise a funneled exit from Gemini onto eastbound Cottage Grove that's being installed with that reconstruction project that's ongoing right now. There were not concerns expressed at any point during the process by traffic engineering that the Gemini Cottage Grove intersection couldn't handle the traffic that would be generated by this project, in part because, we'll just leave it at they weren't concerned and didn't require a TIA.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. I was confused by condition of approval 45, and I was just wondering if you could clarify what it means. This project is not eligible for residential parking permits. It is recommended that this prohibition be noted in the leases for the residential units. So can folks who live here not have a dedicated parking spot?
No, this is regarding the residential parking permit program, RP3, that we see more in the central city. This is a standard comment that's traffic engineering has recommended for most multifamily projects, and it's just an acknowledgement that based on that noted section 12.138 parent 14, that I believe any building with either more than 3 or more than 4 dwelling units, newly constructed building with more than 3 or 4 dwelling units is not eligible for RP3s. Okay. And that this is just a note that should the residential parking permit program make its way further east and ever serve parts of Grandview Commons, that this project would not be eligible for on-street parking permits. And again, it's solely for on-street parking. It has nothing to do with the on-site, both the surface parking lot and the garage that's proposed.
Okay, I figured it was something like that. Thank you.
Alder Rommel.
Thank you. So, Mr. Parks, I guess I'm still wanting, you sort of mentioned earlier your UDC comments, the staff report did relate to the UDC. And I'm still trying to give you an opinion, and it's really hard to see the close enough version of the rendering to tell you anything meaningful. But as I went back and forth, it does definitely seem like the one side has the beige or whatever brick in it, sort of it creates a different pattern. And I think that's what you're trying to get at, to try and break up the massing. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I don't have necessarily a great image to provide that sort of silver bullet comparison. and it may just be a difference of opinion between the project team and city staff. I think maybe what we were hoping for, and again, these are the project plans that were linked in the agenda. This is the rendering that Mr. Munson and Mr. Ott showed previously. Basically looking towards the southeast from what would be a raised patio at the View Apartments. And I think we were looking for that, what I don't know is if you can see my cursor moving right now, but looking to distinguish the western half of the Sharpsburg frontage past the corner recess. So the corner at North Star and Sharpsburg is recessed above the first floor. So not counting that first bay moving east from there, where the building is, it remains parallel to Sharpsburg the entire length. So the bend in the building that you're seeing on screen now is corresponding to the curve in Sharpsburg as you go from North Star towards Gemini, and basically looking to use that break where the building curves to basically treat the exteriors differently. Whereas in this case, on the second, third, and fourth floors, the architect is continuing the same architectural treatment through that middle portion of the building, and then again at the fifth and sixth floors below the parapet. I think in our internal staff discussions that led to the recommendation in the report, we were looking for something more vertical to happen where the bend in the building occurs, so that you had two more distinct applications. You basically had one 6-story mass, and then you had the curve, and then you had a different treatment of the 6-story mass, and then you had the recessed corner element as proposed, so that if you were looking south towards the building, it would perhaps look less like a singular structure and more like two conjoined masses. And our reference to the south facade is it kind of feels like the opposite side of the bend as it faces to the south. So this would be looking from Cottage Grove towards the northwest. Sharpsburg is not visible. That you have an element that is more distinctly massed in what would effectively be the center when viewed from the south. When you count the North Star wing, then the center wing, and then the eastern wing closest to Gemini Drive, that there is a more distinct massing that occurs on the south than what you have on the north, and proposing to the Plan Commission whether they would like to see a similar treatment on the Sharpsburg facade to what you see on screen now, which is that same building wing, but viewed from the south.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think I definitely agree that something like this approach should be taken on the other side. Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Mr. Parks, if we can look at the presentation again, if you look at A200 and A201, I think that kind of helps to shed some light on what we're talking about. I think A200, that's different than what's in our packet, I suppose. It was the side, there we go. There's A201, and that's the side I think we're talking about. And if you look at the next one, I think it shows the front side that has those vertical, on the lower left, you see those vertical runs all the way up the building. And I think it's the difference between that and the previous one. And I agree with Alder Rummel that having that verticality differentiates the areas better than the previous slide, and that some of what Commissioner Cantrell was referring to in his comments about the overall architectural style, I think would be addressed by that. So I agree. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Are there any other questions of staff? I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, I will move that I recommend that the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendment, approving the amended general development plan for Grandview Commons Town Center, B block at 6003 to 6067 Gemini Drive, approving the specific implementation plan to construct a 6-story mixed-use building at that same address to the City Council with a favorable recommendation, and with the recommendations of the Urban Design Commission, with the, suggestion or that the commission, the Urban Design Commission, look at breaking up the north elevation of the side of the building with some sort of central feature similar to that on the south side, and that an additional condition that the bike parking in the garage level be moved to a more convenient location for bikers as approved by city staff.
Alder Lemmer, were you looking to second that?
Actually, I wanted to offer a friendly amendment.
Well, let's get a second. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded. And let's have Commissioner Cantrell speak to his motion, and then if you want to say something else. Okay. Commissioner Cantrell.
Sure. I think this is a good project. I am supportive of the 6-story building. I think it will fit into the area. I guess I'm hoping that the Urban Design Commission will adjust the architecture of the building, especially on the north side, to address our concerns and staff's concerns about the monolithic elevation. I would also suggest that they look at what I call the lid of the building and look at if that lid is necessary on the entire structure, or if it can be adjusted with the adjustment that we're suggesting on the north side of the building. But I think this is a good project. I think it meets the standards, and that's why I'm supporting it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. I wanted to a friendly amendment to require dog waste receptacles.
Sure.
Is that accepted by all commissioners? I'm looking for nodded heads because it is in the purview of everybody. Okay, I see nodded heads, so that's in then. Thank you. Did you want to say anything else, Alder Lemmer?
Just that I am going to support this. As I mentioned before, the engagement with the North Star Neighborhood Association Board was extensive, and they have been supportive. I really appreciate the comments and the voices of the folks who have spoken from the community who are concerned about the height of the buildings. And I feel that the changes that have been made and the further input from the Urban Design Commission are going to help address a lot of these concerns. And the fact that the plaza is very attractive and it's going to be a community space and it should be a good complement to the commercial space, I think will be a good way to finish out this neighborhood center. So that is why I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other comments or discussion about the motion? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see raised hands to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8. Legistar 60476, 817 Williamson Street, 3rd Lake Ridge Historic District, 6th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a commercial building, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district for a mixed-use building with less than 75% non-residential ground floor facing the primary street, consideration of a conditional use in the TSS district for a mixed-use building with less than 75% non-residential ground floor area, and consideration of a conditional use in the TSS district for a mixed-use building exceeding 25,000 square feet in floor area to allow construction of a 3-story mixed-use building with approximately 800 square feet of commercial space and 24 apartments. We do have a staff person who will be speaking. Ms. Prusak.
Versus the Plan Commission?
We are not hearing you, so.
Is it? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, excuse my hand holding up the microphone. The applicant requests approval of a demolition permit and 3 conditional uses in order to construct a 3-story mixed-use building with 833 square feet of commercial space, 24 apartments, and 17 underground vehicle parking stalls. The subject property is located within the 3rd Lake Ridge Historic District and therefore required a certificate of appropriateness from the city's Landmarks Commission for the land combination, demolition, and new construction. A certified survey map was required for this application as there is an underlying lot line that needs to be dissolved prior to new construction. At their June 1st, 2020 meeting, the Landmarks Commission found the standards met and approved the COA for the demolition and land combination. And at their August 18th meeting last week, the Landmarks Commission approved the COA for new construction. During the time lapse between those 2 meetings, the applicant revised their plans to be more consistent with the historic district, and both plans are available in the legislative file, but like the report earlier, the one that was included in your report and my staff report was based off is the most current, which was approved at Landmarks. So following those approvals, the applicant's now before the Plan Commission for demolition and conditional use requests. The applicant proposes to demolish a 1-story commercial building that was constructed in 1966. In regards to the demolition request, given the Landmarks approval and finding that the existing building is well outside of the period of significance for the 3rd Lake Ridge Historic District in both its architectural style and form, or out of character with the historic resources, the Planning Division believes that because of this finding, the demolition approval standards can be found met. In regards to the adopted plans for the subject site, the comprehensive plan recommends neighborhood mixed use for the subject property, which calls for buildings between 2 to 4 stories and up to 70 dwelling units per acre. While the proposed density of 81 dwelling units per acre exceeds the plan recommendations, the subject site is well served by transit, parks, grocery stores, and other neighborhood amenities, and staff does not believe that the additional density will diminish the use's values and enjoyment, nor the normal and orderly development along Williamson Street and the larger neighborhood. The Williamson Street build plan contains detailed design standards for new construction and recommends that new buildings in this specific area on Williamson Street not exceed 2.5 stories. While this proposal is 3 stories, I'll note that the traditional shopping street zoning district allows buildings up to 3 stories or 40 feet by right, and no conditional use is being sought for excess height. As outlined in the staff report, the Planning Division believes that this proposal generally conforms to the design standards included in the build plan. Additionally, in regards to conditional use approval standard number 9, given the landmark's approval of the new construction in the local historic district, staff believes that the proposed building design is compatible with the pattern of development along, I'm just going to say Willie Street and the Third Lake Ridge Historic District. Therefore, the Planning Division believes that all the conditional use standards of approval can be found met. At the time of report writing, all the public comments received were directed to the Landmarks Commission, but since the Plan Commission report was published, planning received multiple comments, both in support and opposition to the proposal, which are included in the legislative file. So, considering the extensive Landmarks Commission review, plan recommendations, and the traditional shopping street zoning district requirements, the Planning Division recommends the Plan Commission find the standards for demolition permits and conditional uses are met and approve these requests subject to the comments and conditions contained in the staff report. And with that, I will be able to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prusak. Moving on, I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Kevin Burrow, 7601 University Avenue, Middleton, Wisconsin, in support, wishing to speak, representing Kanothi and Bruce Architects. Mr. Burrow.
All right, good evening. Can we put up the presentation, please?
Sorry, here we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, we can. If there's a way to enlarge it, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Is it not?
Okay, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Burrow.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, what we have before you is the proposed redevelopment of the 817 Williamson Street, and we've overlaid the existing building in the lower corner of the image, which is a existing 1-story commercial building, which has been proposed to be removed. Next slide, please. Here you can see the context photos that were put together for the Landmarks Commission, where you can see the character of the buildings along Williamson Street on the upper portion of the screen, the buildings immediately across the street from us shown in the middle of the screen, then also the scale, character, and massing of the buildings as you look down the block from Livingston Street down Williamson Street at the lower image. Next slide, please. Here's our site plan layout where we've located the drive to the underground along the northern side of the property, and we've created an L-shaped building such that we have deliberately created 2 facade elements along Williamson Street with a gap between the facades of 6 feet. So we have a 23-foot wide facade for the commercial space, then a 23-foot wide facade for the residential area as well. And we are stepping the building down from 3 stories to 2 stories, both along Williamson Street and also along the rear portion of the property. And we've also been able to create green space both along the southern side of the building and the western side, with lawn available for all residents, and we have a sidewalk connection out to Williamson Street. Next slide, please. Here's the overall landscaping plan, where again, you can see we've got the green space available both along the southern and western sides and the sidewalk connection out. Next slide. Here's a compilation of the floor plans where we've got the 17 underground parking stalls in the basement along with 24 bicycle parking stalls. In the first floor, we've got the commercial space shown in orange, which is the 2-story facade element, and then the lobby immediately adjacent to that. And then behind that are the 24 apartment units. And then on the third floor plan is where you can see how we've stepped the building back from 3 stories to 2 stories, both along Williamson Street and along the entire southern or rear portion of the property. Next slide, please. Here's the rendering of the building showing the 2-story commercial facade where the building does step back, and we're able to create a rooftop patio for the 3rd floor apartment, and then also the 3-story facade for the commercial space with, again, that deliberate gap between the facades. Next slide, please. Here's a view looking down Williamson Street. Again, now you can clearly see the 3-story facade of the commercial space, and then also the drive to the underground parking, which has been recessed back 59 feet from the sidewalk and also lowered in grade. Next slide, please. Here's a better view where you can see the transition of these 2-story facade and 3-story facade, again with the gap between. You've also stepped the corner of the building back along the drive to the underground, and you can see the transition of the height as it goes down the block, down to the commercial building at the end of the block. Next slide, please. Here's a rendering of the back facade where, again, you can see we've stepped it down from a 3-story facade to a 2-story facade and created this green space for the rear yard for all residents to use. Next slide.
Thank you, Mr. Burrow. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Tracy Dietzel, 515 South Patterson, Madison, Wisconsin, opposed and wishing to speak. Ms. Dietzel. Ms. Dietzel, you're unmuted on our side.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. I have written multiple letters about this and I was quite surprised with the Landmarks Commission approval of this. Actually quite surprised at the recommendation of the staff for approval of this from planning. I think the building looks okay. The renderings we just saw, I do not believe are really accurate because when I'm looking at the measurements, it seems like it's a good full 8 feet above any nearby existing buildings. I mean, the height on it. And I think the main problem on this block in this historic district is that the height and the mass and the setback are pretty inconsistent with that build to plan that a lot of people spent a lot of time and looked at the kind of developments that would be happening. I feel like what's really happened is that this overmass of building is having to be built because the site was purchased at too high a price to really fit into what Build 2 recommends. I don't think planning should approve someone's mistaken high price that they paid too much. I pay a lot in taxes to live here. I'm a person that also owns a home in this neighborhood that has worked really hard for 30 years to keep with the standards of the historic neighborhood. I think there's a lot of people that feel this way. We're not against building. I think this building has great potential, but it's not quite there yet. My recommendation is to really stick to the Build 2 plans for this side. This side of the block is very different from what's recommended for the other side. And it changes the character of the neighborhood in a great way. And I had some suggestions in the letter that I wrote to the Planning Commission today. I hope you'll take a look at those. I'm not going to take your time to reiterate them right here because I think you should have that paperwork in front of you. And let me know if you don't have that, and I'll be glad to mention my suggestions again. So that's all I have for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dietzel. The next registrant is Gregory T. Smith, neither support nor oppose, and wishing to speak, 820 Jennifer Street. Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, very good. I had started out neither being for or against it, and I'm actually leaning against it. And based on just listening to the presentation that I just heard, the building itself, I don't think it's that bad of a looking building. I own the property directly behind this proposed project. I would share a property line with their I have a question too. You don't have to answer it now, but I'd like to hear an answer to it later. There was supposedly a lot line that needs to change. I'd like to know which lot line that was. I'd like to have someone address that. The other thing is there's a huge maple tree that borders on my property and the property proposed to develop. And I've looked at the artist renderings and so on, and I cannot see for the life of me how that the tree can be maintained and still build that structure. And that's, I've owned this property for 22 years now. And I remember when Eric Minton built the structure across the street and told everyone that it was only going to be a 3-story and then end up putting a elevator shaft on it, which I made it a 4-story. So it might be, excuse me, I might be wrong, and it might be 2-story, went to 3-story. But my point is this: the building that's existing there, I have no problems with it being demolished. I wouldn't call it an eyesore, but it doesn't really serve the neighborhood. I'm okay with development, but I also am cognizant of understanding that 17 parking stalls for a building that size is not going to probably cut it. And therefore, that pushes more cars onto the side streets, Livingston, Jennifer, and so on. I'm also concerned about the noise of apartments and balconies or whatever overlooking my property. I'm also concerned about my loss of privacy and my tenants' loss of privacy. Currently, right now, it's pretty quiet. I mean, when the doors close on those buildings for the evening, people go home, it gets very quiet. You can't even hardly hear the traffic on Williamson Street. If the tree is affected, it's going to totally make it more, I think, putting more sound out there, and I'm not in favor of that. I would be in favor of a lower scale building than what's being proposed. I see the artist renderings and they say 2 stories, but yet I still see 3 stories. And I thought that was already addressed previously. And that's when I was sort of in favor of the project. I also see that putting the structure right directly behind me is going to be it's going to be much higher than the structure that I have, which is a 2-story structure. And I'm just seeing it a little bit out of line from my house, which was built in 1872. And it's quite historic. It was built by Arnold Breitenbach, who was one of the first.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. That concludes your available 3 minutes. The next registrant is Steve Ross, 813 Williamson Street in Madison, either support nor opposed and wishing to speak. And just a reminder, again, 3 minutes. Mr. Ross.
Mr. Ross, we have attempted to unmute on our side. You may be getting a prompt box to unmute. If you could just select unmute, then you should be able to speak.
Mr. Ross, it sounds like you need to unmute on your side. Okay, I think we're going to move on to the next registrant, and perhaps, Mr. Ross, you could kind of work on that to see if you can unmute from your side. The next registrant is William Butcher, 827 East Washington Avenue, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Butcher.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thanks for having me on here. I'd like to just register in support of Brandon's project, and not really so much Brandon's project as the idea of what seems to me to be an appropriately scaled and thoughtful and mindful project that, took into consideration multiple rounds of dialogue and feedback between the neighborhood, between the Landmarks Commission, and really seemed to me to kind of epitomize how development should happen. And that is taking into consideration all those voices, and not necessarily to have, a few voices say that, well, it's not, it doesn't conform to this, that, or the other, when, as we know, Landmarks, passed this after lots of revision from Brandon. So I like the scale, but in addition to that, I just want to, it's not just about 821 Williamson here. This is about how we approach development and community design. And I know that, starting, 20 plus years ago with the beginning of the Build 2 program, we came to a place where there were guidelines put into place, but the vicissitudes of the past or the thinking of the past may not really accommodate the needs and the tumult and the pressures of the present. And we have to be a little bit more, I think, foresightful and forward-looking as a neighborhood and as a city. And this is an example where I thought this was a no-brainer. And the fact that there is, active opposition to this project kind of indicates that maybe there's a force towards homogeneity or monoculturalism in the neighborhood that I don't think contributes to vitality. And we really need new businesses and new people coming into the neighborhood. And the fact is, people want to live in our neighborhood. They want to be here because of all the work that as a city we've done to create a downtown business district, an entertainment district, and most importantly, employment. So we have office users, large employers looking at downtown, the Capitol Square in East Washington as a new target for themselves. Well, they will not do so if we don't have places for people to live or their future employees to live, much less their present employees. The city themselves has, commissioned multiple studies over the last 20 years or more, looking at demographic growth and what we need to do. And we are woefully underhoused. And this is something that contributes to escalating rent prices, increasing housing prices, and the Marquette neighborhood is kind of front and center on where this is most critical. So I like this project because it's taken into consideration, a half dozen rounds of revisions that scaled down the project to something that the neighborhood, the Landmarks, and everybody else has really contributed to. And
thank you, Mr. Bridger. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Gary Tipler, 807 Jennifer Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Mr. Tipler.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I believe that there may be some photographs that I could share at this point. I think it's important if I can instruct somebody to share those, that would be helpful. I just took photographs showing up and down the street to show what's there because it's something that hasn't easily been witnessed. All right.
Those are up.
Thank you. Yeah, if you can enlarge that to as much as you can, that'd be great. We can look at one photo at a time if necessary. These are just examples of four commercial properties on that block that have been changed thanks to the guidance of the landmarks ordinance over the years.
Mr. Beck, can you enlarge those at all? Okay, I guess that's it.
All right. If you want a page down, but just let's hold. Okay. This is mid-block, and this is one of the properties that was considered to be towards the northeast edge of the view area considered by landmarks. The next one down, beyond that, could you page down, please? And this is the one at the end of the block outside of the district, but I guess we're on to the next page. This is a view looking down the 800 block of the street. You can see buildings on both sides, which have been renovated in recent years. Page down again, please. Then going down on covering mostly the southeast side of the street. Next image. There are a row of houses. There are 4 houses renovated in the 1980s. Next, please. Thank you, Sydney. And then you begin to see a couple of spaces. That's the 4th house. Next, please. Commercial building, and then you see another single house that is near the associated property that's under discussion this evening. Next. Again, similar views, spaces between the buildings where there had been others that are gone. Next. And this is the parking lot to be replaced with the proposed project. Next. And next. And then you see another house and one of the commercial buildings, originally a wheelwright and a blacksmith, renovated just a few years ago. Next, where the butcher was located. And then this is the end of the street views, showing yet another wheelwright and blacksmith, and then the new building by Brandon Cook, the 3-story building at the end that was just completed last year, I believe. And then next, and this is the view area that was considered. So my house would be one of those at the very edge of the district. But you can see the relative size. I had also sent an email with an attachment that late this afternoon that has
that concludes your time, Mr. Tipler.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next registrant is Steve Olson, 416 South Patterson Street, opposed and wishing to speak. And a reminder, 3 minutes. Mr. Olson.
Testing.
Yes.
Good evening. It's a great pleasure to discuss this matter with you. How do you protect something like the U.S. Constitution or a first edition of Moby Dick? Do you store it the same way that you store a copy of last week's Wisconsin State Journal? No, you do not. You protect a thing that is precious with special treatment. The Williamson Street area is a precious old area. It's not fragile like an ancient book, but it's vulnerable to unscrupulous agents. They will look for opportunities to exploit. Build 2 sets detailed standards specifically written for this area. Respect these standards, and a development can be accepted and then flourish. Disrespect the standards, and all the developer does is show us who they really are. Williamson Street does not need help protecting itself from the rain, the snow, the wind, or the cold, but older historic districts can have vulnerabilities that were caused by decades of neglect by our own city. We who are now at this meeting can make amends for that neglect by following the criteria of Build 2 and rejecting the proposal for 817 Williamson by Brandon Cook. Just one item to comment on of the many ways in which this project proposal tramples on the criteria of Build 2. It's disingenuous for 6 feet of the so-called underground parking level to stick up higher than the sidewalk level and not call this building a 3 2/3 story building. If I promised to sell you something for $3,000, but then sent you a bill for $3,666, you would say, well, hey, that's not what you said. This is just one of the many ways in which it was attempted to sell this building to our neighborhood. There is a flight of 12 steps inside the front door to get up to the actual first floor level. This is not a 3-story building. Build 2 calls for a 2.5-story building on this side of the block. This building is too tall. Please reject the Brandon Cook proposal for 817 Williamson as it now stands. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. The next registrant is Linda Leonards, South Patterson Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak, to be followed by Claire. No, the last registered speaker is Ms. Leonards. Ms. Leonards.
Should be hearing an audio prompt to hit a button because you are calling on a phone. There should be an audio prompt for the button to hit to unmute yourself.
Perhaps we could try Mr. Ross again while Ms.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So let's go with Mr. Ross, and then we will come back to Ms. Leonards. Mr. Ross, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak. I'm the owner of 813 Williamson Street. I'm new to this, so forgive me if my questions are a little elementary here, but the lot line that it looks like between our lot line and the digging of the parking structure looks to be just over 10 feet in distance. Is that fairly typical for properties downtown Madison?
We are here to listen to you right now, so we will not be responding to your questions at this point. Feel free to post some, but we'll try to answer them later. Go ahead.
Oh, well, all I have are questions. So if you would it be just better to post them?
Go ahead and run through them quickly.
Okay, the erosion control devices, the black tarp fencing, I know that's on the street level. Is that also on the level between my building and the construction site? And my third question is, I know on the site plan that if there's any damage to sidewalks or curbs or whatever, that they're responsible for that. Does that include the damage to the sidewalk on my property or just the property in front of where he's building? So those are my questions. Thank you for listening to them. How would I find out the responses to these questions?
Well, we may be able to answer some of those tonight, but otherwise you should be talking to city staff and the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's try Ms. Leonards again.
Yeah, Linda, if you could press *6, that's to toggle your mute function on your phone. So if you could press *6, that should be able to unmute you.
Can you try unmuting her again, Jesse? I just got an email from her saying that I am on the phone. It tells me to press *6, and then it continues to say I'm muted by the meeting host.
Yep, I have attempted to unmute. Linda, if you could give that one more shot with that *6. That doesn't appear to be working.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Leonards, that we will not be able to, it seems, to hear from you. The next registrant is Claire Weekert, 403 South Livingston Street, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Followed by William Cardaz, 1311 East Wilson Street, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Followed by Jeff Waldman, 1050 Jennifer Street, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. All of the other registrants are not wishing to speak.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just did see there's one other registrant available to answer questions. It's Peter Wolf at 945 Jennifer Street, in opposition and available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other additions, Ms. Stouter?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. One more chance for Ms. Leonards, and then we will move on. Okay, it looks like it's not working. So, are there questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Solheim.
Yes, I had a question. I believe this would be for Mr. Burrow. In looking at the landmarks reports, it looks like you were there, well, I think a few times, but their approvals came in 2 steps. I was just wondering if you could walk us through some of the changes that you made in the design between the prior proposal and then the one that they granted the certificate of appropriateness for at the last meeting.
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for the question. We were before landmarks on 3 separate occasions. We received the approval or the certificate of appropriateness for the demolition and the lot combination at the first presentation, but then they asked us to take a look at the massing and scale of the building to come back for the certificate of appropriateness for the new construction. So the changes that we made from start to finish basically entailed taking the building, which was originally designed as 44 feet tall, and reduced it down to just over 40 feet tall. And then also taking the mass of the building, which was originally just under 42 feet wide, sitting along the sidewalk, and breaking that into 2 pieces, each being just 23 feet wide, and creating that 6-foot gap, which is similar in scale and character to other properties on this block, where you have existing buildings closely located next to each other with approximately a 6-foot gap between them. So, and then also the final change that we made was stepping the facade down from a full 3-story along Williamson Street and creating a 2-story facade, then a separate 3-story facade, such that, again, the visual rhythm of solids and voids, as they require, are consistent with the existing properties on this section of Williamson Street, and also the rhythm of buildings, masses, and spaces. So those are the changes that we made in order to obtain the final certificate of appropriateness by reducing the height of the building from 44 feet down to just over 40 feet, or just over, 40 feet. And then also the 2-story facade is only just over 29 feet. And then the width of the building being reduced down as well into the 2 separate elements.
Okay, thank you for that summary. That's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rummel.
While you're still on, Mr. Burrow, can you start to answer some of the questions that Mr. Ross raised? My notes show that one was about the lot line within 10 feet. Is that typical? The second was about erosion control between the buildings, and the third was like, what is your responsibility if there's damage?
Yes, I can answer those questions. So the first question of the 10-foot location of the building from the property. Actually, this is more generous than typical. Normally it's a 5 or a 6 foot setback from the side property line, but we are providing 10 feet along the adjacency to his property. So this is actually larger than what would be considered typical. The excavation for our building, though, cannot affect the grade on his property as all, such that if necessary, shoring measures will be put into place to stabilize his property prior to excavation of our property. With regards to the question on the erosion control measures, we will be providing erosion control measures on all sides of the property as deemed necessary based on the direction of water flow off of the property, such that no flow of water off of our property can occur onto adjacent properties during construction. So the erosion control measures will be put into place, will be considered on the downhill slope of the property. So if the property does slope towards this property, there will be erosion control measures installed between the properties. Then the last question is with regards to the sidewalk replacement. We are responsible for any damage to sidewalk during construction directly in front of our property, but also if there is some minor damage adjacent to the property due to our construction means and methods, the city will also require us to replace those tiles as well prior to granting our certificate of occupancy.
Thank you. And I realize also that Mr. Smith had a couple questions. One was about the maple tree in the back.
Yes.
Going to be preserved and how?
So that maple tree does exist basically almost on the lot line between the properties. There's an existing retaining wall on the back side of this property, and the tree is on the upper side of that retaining wall such that we are preserving that existing retaining wall. Because we've set the building back 20 feet from the rear property line, we will not be disturbing that retaining wall at all, such that it is our hope and opinion that the tree will be able to survive because the tree roots themselves have already been contained behind that retaining wall for a large portion, basically along the entire property bordering between our two parcels. So again, our basement foundation is 20 feet away from what would be considered the trunk area of that tree. So all measures will be put into place to do our best to preserve that tree, as we will not be disturbing the soil around it.
And his other question was, I think, about sort of the landmarks process for the lot line. He asked about the lot line, and could you explain what that involves?
Yes. This property has been addressed as both 817 and 821 Williamson Street, such that it was originally two separate parcels with the lot line running perpendicular to Williamson Street. And that is the underlying lot line that needs to be dissolved. It has been functioning as one parcel with the existing building and surface parking lot serving it, such that there's no disruption to the property lines around the perimeter of the site. It is just, in essence, a middle dividing lot line that is being dissolved.
And then I guess my question is, what kind of commercial space is being envisioned for this property?
We've proposed a space of approximately 833 square feet. We don't have a specific user in mind, but it is the goal of the developer to have something that would help service the neighborhood. So some user that could provide a service to the neighborhood. But again, we do not have a specific tenant who has signed a lease or made any letter of intent for this space.
And just help me understand, it was through one of the comments that we received that I started even thinking about, how that conditional use of less than 75%. How did you come up with that amount of space? Why not bigger? What was the thinking?
We want the commercial space to be immediately adjacent to the sidewalk for handicap accessible entrance. We also have to have the entry to the apartment building also be handicap accessible. And this property does slope almost a full story from Williamson Street up to the rear property line, getting closer to Jennifer Street. So we have a dilemma with regards to the grades of the property to account for. So we've basically given half the front facade to the commercial space. And then we also need to accommodate the underground parking, which has been requested underneath that space. So with the drive down off of Williamson Street to the underground, and then within the building, we are further ramping down the basement as we turn and go back towards Williamson Street, such that we'll only be able to create sufficient floor area and headroom in the basement by having the commercial space be approximately that 800 plus square feet.
Thank you very much. That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Alder Rummel. Are there other questions of the registrants? Alder Rummel.
I think Miss Leonard said she tried calling in on a new phone. If you should, we should try again.
I think there's actually an issue with the phone system right now. It's not allowing to unmute. I'm not sure if that's a Zoom issue or not, but it is not allowing any callers to unmute.
So, Ms. Leonards, if you can use a computer to dial to access. Otherwise, technology is a barrier here.
Can you give that one more shot, Linda, if you can hear me? I'm trying a workaround.
Hello.
Yes.
Am I through?
Yes, you are. And you will have 3 minutes, Ms. Leonards. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And sorry about I don't know what was going on here. Okay. The comprehensive plan says that context-sensitive design is particularly important where redevelopment is occurring in close proximity to buildings of historic value. Landmarks does not determine whether a project is context-sensitive. In the Third Lake Historic District, landmarks review is based on an undefined, visually compatible. This project went through 3 landmarks meetings. Height, mass, and rhythm were concerns at all of them. And during those, it was mentioned several times by commissioners that they do not consider Build 2 requirements. The Plan Commission doesn't refer to UDC. As an example, the excess 126 Langdon height, UDC said it wasn't merited, but Plan Commission didn't defer to them. And it should not be deferring to landmarks in this issue either. The existing and intended characters at Williamson remain part of the historic district. There's too much mass. It's 5 times bigger than the other mixed-use properties that sit at the sidewalk. It is the front portion is more than double the biggest corner property, a city and federal landmark. And the mass is clearly visible. You can see that from how big it's going to be on the first page of Mr. Burrow's presentation. The 60-foot or so portion abutting the sidewalk is too wide compared to the historic properties. The 5 to 6 gap between the 2 portions of the building doesn't create a sense of space. Only one other gap is this small at 803 to 805. It's not consistent with Build that specifies no building shall be wider than 60 feet. This project is 80 or more feet, 80 to 81. 706 is not the poster child for exceeding Build 2. For that particular project, staff provided a rationale of a sort why 706 could be higher. And it was a step down from someday perhaps having 7 stories on the 600 block. It didn't have overwhelming support from Plan Commission. The first thing was to refer, then it got voted in because the chair broke the tie. It was appealed, and on the appeal, 7 alders out of the 15 voted to overrule the Plan Commission. So it wasn't an outstanding level of support for that decision. 126 Langdon was found by the Plan Commission to not be a context-sensitive design. And although 126 is much larger than the 817 proposal, the historic resources surrounding 26 are also much larger than those that surround 817. So if you compare what's there to each proposal, there's sort of the same sense of mass difference between them. There's also the issue of the 11% of commercial space. Back in
Ms. Leonards, that concludes your available time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions of any of our registrants? Alder Rummel.
Thank you. I would just ask Ms. Leonards to answer us. Tell us what she was going to say about the 11% commercial. That caught my interest.
You're on, Ms. Leonards.
Okay, thank you. Back in 2014, the ordinance was changed so that in a TSS district, it didn't have to be a mixed-use building. It could be an entirely residential building. Some of the reasons for that included that small commercial play spaces are sometimes incorporated as afterthoughts. Some of these corridors have existing vacant or underutilized spaces, which could be better supported by a greater number of households, and also to help cluster commercial uses within specific areas. The build plan and the Marquette Schenck Atwood plan do talk about clustering uses. And so when we get to a point where there's 11% of commercial space, it sounds like the type of thing this ordinance was designed to fix, that you don't have to have commercial space in here. It's an afterthought. It's a mere 11%, down from 75%. And the Plan Commission has approved projects down to about 18% is what I found. I couldn't find any time where there's been 11% approved. And generally it doesn't matter. The same building can be built in TSS, whether it's all residential or whether it's mixed use. But in this case, it does differ because the standards for a residential building in Third Lake Ridge are substantially different. And those standards would fix a lot of the problems that are seen by various people with respect to this project. For example, there's a 15-foot setback, there's front porches, there's awnings, there's this, there's that. And a lot of those things that are required for residential buildings in TSS would address this mass and height issue. The height could be the same, but if it's set back, it's not as visible.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Ms. Rummel? Alder Rummel?
All right, no, thanks.
Are there any other questions of any of our registrants? I'm not seeing any raised hands. I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Solheim.
So I have a question. There's mention from some of the speakers as well as in the materials about a 2.5-story height limit mentioned, I think, in the Build 2 plan. Could staff talk about, to be honest, I don't even really know what a 2.5-story limit means because everything that we see is a 2-story or a 3-story or 4-story and then a foot height limit. So I'm just kind of wondering what a 2.5-story even gets you, why you would have a 2.5-story building.
Could a staff person, would that be Ms. Prusak? Is Mr. Tucker?
Sure. The zoning code does not have half stories, but the plan dates to a time where people sort of think of and talk about half stories, areas under gable, areas under dormer, or something of that nature. being kind of like a half story. But the zoning code has never had half stories. At least the 1966 code up till the 2013 code only had full or a floor to ceiling story condition being a story. So I think what you're seeing is in the half story is sort of a historical view of those areas that are above the second story but under gable or dormer.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Solheim?
Not right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. Could we just talk some more about the Build 2 plan and how it relates to what we as Plan Commission have to look at? Because what I understand is once the comp plan got approved, it added a little bit more teeth to Build 2 because of the reference of the comp plan to adopted plans. And so, I don't know who the right person is, but it seems like there's several areas that where the staff report said it's generally conforms, where I would say it doesn't conform at all. And for example, a mid-block commercial building or treating the south side and the north side differently, and the flat roof not being mid-block, things like that would be helpful to kind of dissect and make sure we understand the goal of the Build 2 plan.
Looks like Ms. Stouter is going to take that one.
Sure. I think for the beginning of your question, I don't think the relationship between the comp plan and our neighborhood plans changed much through the adoption of the 2018 comprehensive plan. I think, still clearly the adopted sub-area plans are going to be more detailed, and the Plan Commission always will look to those for guidance when considering requests such as the one before you this evening. I think the staff report does a good job of laying out areas of consistency, areas of inconsistency, and it really is up to the Plan Commission to weigh those as you make your determination this evening. As far as the height is concerned, I think the point is made that this is a conditional use for reasons not related to height in the TSS district. The height of the building does meet the height limit for permitted uses in the TSS or traditional shopping street district. And so that's brought to light in the staff report as well. The developer here is not seeking a conditional use to exceed the permitted height in TSS. So that's something that I think we as staff at least considered when doing our review. But all in all, the Build 2 plan has many details. It's a very detailed plan from over 15 years ago, and we tried our best to bring forth what those details were and provide a balanced review of the proposal on this on this site, which is certainly identified as a redevelopment site in that Build 2 plan.
Well, I guess I didn't raise the question of height because, basically it seems like it's a moot point if the TSS allows it by right. I mean, I don't know that we're going to find anything different than that, but there were certain parts of the build plan that this proposal doesn't meet, such as the street frontage being wider than 60 feet if you consider the whole building as an entity. And also having a commercial in the mid block. Those seem to be pretty fundamental issues that this project runs into.
Yeah, I think with regard to the building width, I think the Plan Commission should look at the strategies that the developer has utilized to break up that massing along Williamson Street. The sort of the two separate building masses, and then the very, very deep setback of the garage entrance, which essentially reads as a void along Williamson Street. With regard to the commercial space, I think from a staff perspective, we're pretty flexible as to whether this would include commercial or not. I feel like there are some sort of mixed sentiments about the size of the commercial space being too small, being there at all. I think from a staff perspective, we see that this is an area that can certainly support a small commercial space, given what Willie Street is today, the walkable area, dotted with commercial spaces, especially on corners, but also mid-block. That said, if the proposal had come to us as a purely residential building, I don't think that that's something that staff wouldn't have supported either. And so I think you have a small commercial space that's going to support a relatively short list of uses. You're not going to see a lot of traffic generated or parking pressures generated by such a small commercial space. So I think from the staff perspective, we could have gone either way, but it doesn't seem like it raises concern.
I think I missed something because all of a sudden all this stuff started piling in at me to distract me. But but the bill does say nothing wider than 60 feet. I mean, it clearly states that, and this whole project is wider than 60 feet, taken as a whole building.
Sure. I mean, it's a redevelopment site with a one-story building and a parking lot, and I think the commission needs to consider, again, the design strategy taken by the development team to break down that mass that does exceed 60 feet.
The other question I have is the one raised by Ms. Leonard's in her letter to the Plan Commission about the 11%, and you kind of addressed it too, Ms. Stouter. That could be a purely residential, and I that's when I got distracted. Did I hear you say staff wouldn't have supported that, or did I just miss something that you said?
I think I used a double negative. I think staff could have supported a purely residential proposal here as well. And the lot area requirements could have supported a 24-unit building on this property if it were a purely residential building. And so I think the commercial space, we could have supported it as is, or a proposal without it.
But would that, if it were purely residential, would it then be required to have a 15-foot setback?
That's something I'll look at the zoning administrator to take that one.
Because there's something in the TSS about if a purely residential building is selected, then it has to meet the TRV2 standards.
Mr. Tucker?
Just a second. There's not a requirement. I know what they're talking about, this little TRV2 standards, and that was about lot area and I believe open space or something like that. And so there's not the front yard setback there is no front yard setback required. So it's free of distinction whether the building is a commercial or a mixed use or an entirely residential building.
I just thought I read it the other day, and it said in 28.064 parens 3 parens B that buildings of exclusively residential uses must meet the lot area, lot width, and side yard setback requirements in the TRV2 district. So I guess I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
I think you're looking at an old version of the code. I'm not sure where you found that, but I think that's the one that got changed in 2014.
So when you go into Unicode, sir, that you find this stuff. That's where I found it.
I'm looking at it too, Marcia, so I don't know what to tell you. I could screen share it. I'm looking at it, so.
Yeah, would you do that, please?
Sure.
And so, okay, you're looking at it while you're setting it up.
Okay, so this is the TSS district, and this is that 3280603, and then you said B, right?
Right.
And that's it's part of this amendment here that was modified to It shifted up, I think, and now it's just the transition to residential districts. So I'm not sure what you were.
Yeah, it looked totally different when I looked the other day. I hope we're fixing that Unicode thing. I know we've heard about that. So the basic line, though, the bottom line is it could be purely residential and still have be 4 feet from the sidewalk?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's. I guess the other question I would have is about what's the line between being too much over the dwelling units per acre and being just fine? Because it seems like we apply different standards depending on, I'm not quite sure what. So if the NMU says up to 70 dwelling units per acre and this is 81, how does, what is the thing that says that's okay? I know the staff report says well served by transit, but what does the building, the builds and other kind of things that try to preserve a historic character add to that question?
Ms. Stouter, did you want to take that?
I try. I mean, I think, staff, we've long lamented the weakness of density as a good metric. I think, we've tried to provide a framework that includes densities within the comprehensive plan and many sub-area plans. If this building had even just a few more 3-bedroom units, all of a sudden the density would easily be under 70. So, when you think about the dwelling unit mix, often that can really change the density quite quickly. I think here, the most relevant aspect, as long as it's not grossly out of the framework of that density, of the density spectrum in the comprehensive plan, and by grossly, I don't have a definitive number, but if it was a 200 dwelling unit per acre density, I think we would be much more concerned than we are when it's 81 in something that we have policy guidance that the range goes up to 70. I think the most relevant aspects here really probably are height and massing and that compatibility with the district around it, rather than the density itself. I think, we look at other projects that have been completed in this area are at or even well above this density in recent years. And so the density itself wasn't something that really stood out to staff as a major concern.
Okay, thank you. That's all I got for now.
Commissioner Cantrell.
Thanks. I'd like to address Commissioner Rummel's question about the Bill 2 plan and what the status it has. And I guess I view the Bill 2 plan like many of our neighborhood plans. They are guides, and I'm probably going to get a lot of nasty emails because I've said this, but they are guides. They're not law. They're not zoning ordinance requirements that have hard and fast regulations. And I think the Bill 2 plan has a lot of good guides. And I think that this applicant has tried to address those. And I think that Ms. Stoddard talked about that with the 60-foot width, that the strategy they took was that they tried to divide up the building into 60-foot, the bulk of it along the street frontage, and then recessing the garage area so it would look like it was a narrower building at the street frontage. So I guess, again, I know that we grapple with this a lot, but I guess I view, and maybe staff can correct me if I'm in error here, but being a planner for 35 years, that's how I treated it. So, but neighborhood plans are very good instruments to guide development, but they are guides as I view it. So that's just my comments. Thanks.
Commissioner Solheim.
I was, just having some of the same thoughts in terms of going through the build to plan prior to this meeting. I ran into something that we come into a lot where I can see some things where it doesn't meet it exactly, but then I'm also highlighting things where it does meet it. So, I think that it does further a lot of the goals in that plan, as well as, of course, in the comprehensive plan. But at the same time, I'm really glad that it was in place because I think it guided some of the changes that were made in the design, and looking at the design from those previously submitted and the one that's before us. I think it made some really big improvements in terms of breaking up the facade and having it fit better within the rhythm of that block. So I would agree. I understand what Alder Rummel is bringing up in terms of very specific things, but at the same time, there are other parts of that plan that I think this fits really well within. That's all I have.
Are there other questions of staff? Alder Rummel.
This isn't a question directly about this project, but an overall question. As someone who has been trying to shepherd a process, which is the landmarks review process that got put on hold since March, where we were carefully looking at how do we address the conflict between, say, a Third Lake Ridge Historic District and a TSS zoning district. And the build is kind of what the neighborhood has that gives direction to an ordinance, a historic district ordinance that is very nebulous about voids and, solids and voids, and it doesn't have things about height. And, it's so I guess my question is, Ms. Stouter, I know it's not like I'm ready to get back to work anytime soon, but we need to get back to work on that because I feel like the precedent that this project sets, if all of you think that it's worth approving, is one that we'll be having to weigh on the south side from going forward. Now, I'm sure somebody is going to say, well, what about Struck and Irwin? Struck and Irwin's on the north side. That's going to be a whole different kind of approach to that block because of the build plan. And so I guess I worry that if any of you really looked at that visually related area map and saw the one that was, say, in Mr. Tipler's PowerPoint, where that whole building fills up that whole lot, but nothing else is like that, how it is that we're preserving this historic fabric. And I guess that's the question I would ask all of you to think about as you decide how to make your decision. Thank you. And maybe Ms. Stouter could answer, has staff talked at all to the mayor's office about our, landmarks review work?
We haven't had recent conversations with the mayor's office about that work. Could certainly reach out to some of the alders who are on that committee and kind of take their temperature on restarting that process. I would want to definitely check in with the city attorney's office as well on capacity. But yeah, that's something that has been sitting for several months, and more than I do about the politics behind that and some of the rationale for why it has been stalled. But sure, that's something we could certainly take a look at restarting.
Are there any other questions of staff? Did you have more, Alder Rummel?
I just was going to respond to that it's a political decision that this committee hasn't met. I just disagree, and that's all I'll say. Thank you. It's COVID. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, I am looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
Okay, Well, I'm going to recommend that the Planning Commission find that the standards are met and approve the demolition and conditional use request in order to construct a 3-story mixed-use building at 830 and 830 square feet of commercial area with 25 apartments at 8. Let's see, what's the address?
817.
817, thank you, Williamson Street.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Sundquist. Did you wish to speak to your motion?
Sure. I appreciate all the comments I received on this, and I'm sure that, and I read every one, and in fact I went back to look at the landmarks revisions to this site plan, and I think that the neighborhood did make this project a lot better in looking at the different designs they came up with, and I think the architect listened, and again I think that although the property is 80 feet wide, the building is broken up so that it has a 60-foot element, and then it's recessed back to another 20-foot element. But I think it has addressed that issue quite well, and I think that some of the other standards, 40-foot, the height, 3 stories. I think. I know that the Bill 2 plan proposes 2.5 stories on the south side of the street, which is more residential in character. But I think that a 3-story fits quite well into this area, and I don't think it established a huge precedent for this block or this series of blocks. I do think that this building is well designed and it meets the standards as I view it, and so that's why I'm supporting this.
Alder Heck.
Thank you. I actually am not going to support this motion because I think some of the analogies with our recent decision at 126 Langdon are valid. I actually agree with Commissioner Cantrell that the width of the building is not a problem. I think that it doesn't just read as a 56-foot wide building or whatever it is. I mean, it really kind of is. But I find the front massing, this is the analogous to 126 Langdon part, to not fit in with the intended character of the neighborhood and the district. And this is in a local historic district, unlike 126 Langdon. And the intended character of the neighborhood is pretty clear from the Build 2 plan and from the historic preservation ordinance work that's been done, even though, as Alder Rummel appropriately points out, we have a lot of work to do on that still. I think it's pretty clear what the intended character of the south side of Willie Street is. And I think that it has the potential to fit in better. Personally, I could see removing the commercial space entirely, and as a result of that, providing a larger step back on both sides of the building, and that might provide some room for that. But it still just reads quite large, I think, with respect to the massing, with respect to the nearby buildings and the other buildings, especially on the south side.
Alder Rummel.
Thank you. I accept your apology about Lork. I just saw that email come in. Thank you, Ms. Stouter. I don't support this project. I hear all the comments about how it got better. I think it did. I think, the team is earnest and listens. I agree. But, often you say you notice that the Marquette Neighborhood Association weighs in, and they pointedly did not weigh in on this project because it was such a divisive issue where, reasonable people on both sides liked and didn't like this project. And so they always think that you want to hear from them, but you didn't hear from them this time because at the subcommittee level of the Preservation and Development Committee, they routinely said it doesn't meet the build standards and didn't approve it. And so the board decided at their most recent meeting not to try to have a different motion that might try to have, maybe get the votes to approve it, because they said it just wasn't right for the neighborhood to weigh in. So I want that to be clear, because they do think about these things and their responsibility very carefully. And I agree that I don't think this meets conditional use standard number 9 because of the intended character of the district. I mean, think about that parcel next door. It's just a house. It's like that T shape. There's a house and behind it some kind of warehousey structure. Who's to say that somebody wouldn't want to sell that to somebody who would tear down that stuff and then have another full lot building, and then 2 of those parcels would be in the middle of the block. And then, the staff report would say, well, there's precedent because right next door we did this. And so I guess for me, number 9 is the intended character of the district is to kind of keep it a district that's historic, and we need new housing, and there's lots of other places in District 6 and nearby that have places for it, but this maybe isn't the best place. And then the other standard I don't think it meets is kind of what I refer to as number 4 is like, okay, so then the next door parcel, is that subject to being infilled and filled up to its capacity? It seems to me that it would be. So I certainly can see that the height is within the kind of realm of okay. I know not everyone will agree with that, but the massing is just so huge, then the gross volume is so much that, and it just begs the question to me, like, why are we saying that this should be allowing some little afterthought of commercial? It just seemed like a way to get around not doing more of a residential property. But I appreciate if you could consider not voting for this, but I certainly understand that you might. Thank you.
Any other input, discussion? Okay, then we will come to a vote. And I'm going to assume unanimous consent unless raised hands to object, and I'm assuming there will be some raised hands. So if you could, I see 4 raised hands to object. So the vote is 4 against the motion, 3 for the motion. Chair will vote, and I am voting with the majority there to make it 5, so motion fails. We would be then looking for another motion, perhaps to place on file without prejudice. And if that is the case, perhaps the alder of the district could then suggest some changes that would make this workable. Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Chair. When I thought about what could work, I did think of it being set back more from the street. And
did you want to make a motion?
Oh, place on file without prejudice.
And I think that you have enumerated the reasons why you do not think it.
I don't believe it meets standard number 9 or number 4. And I also, there was another one, conditional use number 7, which talks about the regulations of the district are not met.
And I see a second by Commissioner Hagenow. Now, would you like to speak to your motion, Alder Rummel?
Thank you. I think that just the gross volume of this building is just too much, and to the way that it could be stepped back from this at the ground level, I think would really help. I don't really have I'm not an architect, so I understand there's grade issues and they want to have parking. So I won't, like on urban design, we were never told how to fix something. So I don't really necessarily have all the answers, but consider a purely residential building, and those are some of my ideas. I mean, even 2 buildings. I know that it was sharing underground something, I don't know, but even something that looked more like 2 buildings. It is like a lot that's 1.5 size lot. It's it's a 97-foot lot compared to the typical 66. So it seems like that might be another alternative approach to look at 2 buildings that were more separated, but maybe related underneath.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Then we will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless there are raised hands to object. 1, 2 raised hands to object. Motion passes. Thank you. That ends the business for tonight. Is there any general business by members? Then I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Commissioner Cantrell and a second by Commissioner Hagenow, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.